Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. M.N. Gupta, Emeritus Professor from Department of Biochemical Engineering and Biotechnology at Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. Today we are going to talk on module Biomembranes 1. That means this is the first module on the biomembranes. We will continue talking about biomembranes in another module because this is a vast area, and this module biomembranes 1 is from paper structure and function of biomolecules 2. For quite some time it was thought that the cellular activity was restricted to the cytoplasm. So the membranes were just thought to be some sort of sac in which the biological active molecules, supramolecular assemblies and all those metabolic activities were contained. Gradually this concept changed. Today the biomembranes play as much role as the cytoplasmic entities. Biomembranes are not inert, but they are very active structures. Lot of biological activity takes place at biomembranes. We start our discussion today on biomembranes, and we also will look at their functions in this module. So the objective of this module are to understand, to start with, how centrifugation helped us in cellular fractionation and localization of the structures, biological structures which are involved in specific biological processes in membranes. We also would learn at another tool which turned out to be very useful called microscopy. Especially high resolution electron microscopy helped us in understanding fine structural features of the membranes. We will also learn how lipid bilayer ultimately evolved into a fluid mosaic model and what are the essential features of this model. We will also learn about finer aspects of the composition of the bilayers, membrane asymmetry and membrane biogenesis. So the concept map consists of the various aspects of the biomembranes, the cellular fractionation, how did it help us in the early days, the microscopy, then the bilayer model. On the cellular fractionation side, we will see the importance of the marker enzymes and cryptic enzymes. As far as the membrane models are concerned, the bilayer model evolved, how did it evolve into the fluid mosaic model, and why membrane asymmetry is important and how it is an integral feature of the fluid mosaic model or the structure of the biomembranes, and finally how these membranes are put together in the living organisms. That will be the final thing. So even till 1968-69, no textbook had a separate chapter dealing with biomembranes. The general view of the biomembranes can be exemplified how these were viewed in a standard textbook of that era. To quote, the structure of the cytoplasmic membrane is of great importance in as much as it is the barrier between the external and internal environments of the cell. So the knowledge about plant and microbial membranes was somewhat greater than the membranes of the mammalian cell. It was known that bacterial membranes are involved in oxidative metabolism. One of the early things which we learnt about biomembranes is that they are essentially lipoproteins in nature, that the lipids are present and the proteins are present and probably together. The difference between active and passive transport was not clear. The involvement of membrane in generating sodium potassium gradient across was known. So vaguely the notion was there that these are not just sacs or containers. Two tools contributed critically to our early understanding of cellular organization in general and biomembranes as well. The first was microscopy. Electron microscopy, which gave much higher resolution than light microscopy, started revealing finer details of the various cells, animal cells and their organelle and microbial cells. The second tool was high-speed centrifugation. We tend to underestimate the contribution of this tool just because presumably it is a common instrument in all biochemistry laboratories. It is not widely known that the debate about the proteins being macromolecules was settled when their centrifugation was done by Swedberg. The centrifugation thereby also provided first good estimates of the molecular weights of the proteins or enzymes. It has also told us about approximately and relative sizes of the cellular organelles. Centrifugation is a useful tool in fractionating cellular organelles. Dewey, Cuff, Anderson and Elfrey made notable contributions in this regard. They used centrifugation to fractionate these cellular organelles. This was done by using the centrifuge at different speed or velocity, different speeds, that is at different G value. The cellular fractions thus obtained were characterized in terms of markers or indicator enzymes. These enzymes were very easy to assay, and hence the presence of these enzyme activities acted as a marker for that particular fraction belonging to a particular cellular, consisting of a particular cellular organelle. Thus, it has been common to talk of acid phosphatase particles for lysosomes. One difficulty which did arise and created confusion is that many techniques which were used to create these cell homogenates destroyed the integrity of some organelles. Thus, microsomes were obtained from endoplasmic reticulum and electron transport particles were obtained from mitochondria. Much misleading information about morphology of membranous structures accumulated as these structures were prone to getting pinched off and form vesicular components during attempts to break the cellular structure and isolate subcellular entities. It was found that many enzymes, especially those not present on the membrane surfaces, had latent or cryptic activity. This referred to the fact that these enzymes showed no activity when present in the membranes, presumably since substrate molecules could not access the binding sites. In some cases, their kinetic behavior was very different from their soluble counterparts. There were, of course, enzymes which had isoforms, which consisted of both soluble and membrane bound enzymes, and that is how we came to know about the differences in the kinetic behavior when a particular enzyme is part of a membrane. It is in such instances that cytochemical approaches were useful in ruling out many artifacts. A particular worrisome fact was the finding that highly charged molecules like cytochrome C or ribosomal RNA could detach from their natural structures and bind to something else purely by non-specific electrostatic interactions. It is necessary to appreciate that for few decades, while impressive evidences accumulated about structural aspects of soluble proteins and enzymes, we practically knew nothing about membrane-bound proteins. For example, all early proteins which were isolated, purified, and sequenced were soluble proteins like insulin, bovine pancreatic ribonuclease A, hen egg white lysozymes, and all those pancreatic serine proteases like chymotrypsin and carboxypeptidase. Early efforts at isolation of membrane proteins were not successful. While surfactants were used to detach these from membranes, removal of surfactants often led to their spontaneous aggregation. Attempts at establishing their primary sequence by breaking the chain and fractionating peptides was not very straightforward. Many of these peptides, which are generated by the cleavage of the bigger polypeptides, were highly hydrophobic and aggregated. Gradually, biochemists learned to deal with membrane protein. Protocols for their isolation and purification were developed. Looking at fine structures of solids is possible by far fewer techniques than looking at water-soluble macromolecules. FTIR can help, but that came up much later. Solid-state NMR is also not as easy as NMR of solutions. Similar challenges exist in the areas of enzymes which are immobilized on solid supports, as well as lyophilized powders and other forms of the biocatalysts which are used as heterogeneous catalysts in low water enzymology. As early as 1925, Gorter and Grendel gave the idea of a lipid bilayer. Their idea was based upon their measurements of the total surface area of a red blood cell and the area occupied by monolayers from the lipids isolated from red blood cells. The next contribution came in the form of models proposed by Danieli and Davison in 1925 and by J.D. Robertson few decades later in 1959. These models retained the bilayer concept but placed proteins on the outer surfaces of the bilayers. The current model, called fluid mosaic model, was given in 1972 by Singer and Nicholson. The name fluid mosaic model was actually used in the original title of their paper in Science Journal in that year. By that time, a lot more information was available about structures of lipids in general and phospholipids in particular that helped in developing this model. Their fluid mosaic model also retained the bilayer concept. According to this model, phospholipid molecules are arranged in a repeating pattern to form bilayers. Each bilayer had a thickness of about 50 angstrom. The lipid bilayer, apart from acting as a permeability barrier, also contained proteins. Some proteins were more specifically associated with some lipid molecules. It was essential for the biological function of these proteins to be present in this form. While in general proteins could move laterally within the membranes, their free rotation was not allowed. Some proteins are localized at one of the two surfaces, cytoplasmic or extracellular, of the membranes. Others encompassed the membrane bilayers. As we now know, former are called peripheral proteins, while the later are called integral proteins. All in all, fluid mosaic model viewed biomembranes as more dynamic structures rather than a static one. In fact, two-dimensional solution-like phrases have been used to describe membranes according to this model. The fluid mosaic model was supported by experimental data of various kinds. Low-angle X-ray diffraction showed two peaks at the periphery, with trough in the middle in the electron density plot. The polar heads of phospholipids and glycolipids show higher electron density than non-polar tails in the bilayers. It is known that the hydrophilic molecules cannot pass through the biomembranes unless some integral proteins act as facilitators. At the same time, membrane proteins required the hydrophobic milieu of the membranes to be functional. More often than not, these simply aggregated. Membranes are asymmetric in nature, while this asymmetry is ensured by integral proteins not being allowed to rotate. That constraint is due to the structure of the integral proteins. Such proteins are invariably glycoproteins with oligosaccharides present on the extracellular surface. These hydrophilic proteins, if allowed to rotate, will have to pass through hydrophobic interior. Thermodynamically, that's not favored. The asymmetry of the membranes is a critical design feature. Pumps and channels, which are of tremendous biological importance, depend upon this. The membranes are built by growth on pre-existing membranes. Integral proteins are inserted in an asymmetric fashion. Similarly, glycolipids also are not allowed free rotation. Different lipids like phospholipids and sphingolipids are not positioned arbitrarily. Each biomembrane has fluidity which is tailored within a range depending upon its overall location, function, etc. The factors which define and control the membrane fluidity are many. The fatty acyl chains in the lipid bilayers of phospholipids can have either trans conformation or Gaucher conformation. Trans conformation and Gaucher conformation are converted into each other by rotation by 120 degree, either clockwise or anti-clockwise. The trans conformation leads to highly ordered state, whereas Gaucher conformation introduces elements of disorder. The membrane fluidity is controlled by this factor. Raising temperatures makes membranes non-fluid, more fluid. DSC of model phosphatidylcholine bilayer show the influences of the trans-Gaucher conformation. The bilayers have characteristic Tm. At this Tm, as DSC curve shows, there is a transition. This corresponds to all trans-rigid forms changing to partly Gaucher forms. Length of the acyl chains of the fatty acids and their degree of unsaturation also dictates the Tm. The saturated fatty acids if forming the acyl chains results in higher Tm. Such chains, apart from favorable hydrophobic interactions, pack nicely. Presence of a double bond, as in unsaturated fatty acids, which are in cis conformation. Such bands disrupt the packing, introduce a disorder and lowers Tm of the resulting membrane structure. This means more fluidity in the structure of the membranes. It is estimated that each additional CH2 group contributes minus 0.5 kilocalories per mole to the free energy of interaction between the saturated hydrocarbon chain. So, 3 molecules of C18 saturated fatty acids, stearic acids, pack neatly. On the other hand, the corresponding C18 fatty acid, oleic acid, with just one double bond, disrupts the packing in a significant manner. In prokaryotes, these parameters, like length of the fatty acid chain and percentage and degree of unsaturation in the chain, are used to regulate the membrane fluidity. If the growth temperature of E. coli is lowered from 42 to 27 degrees centigrade, the ratio of saturated fatty acids to unsaturated fatty acids drops from 1.6 to 1.0. Less percentage of saturated fatty acids ensures that at lower temperature of growth, E. coli membranes are able to retain the desired fluidity. Thus, as mentioned earlier, membrane fluidity is a critical parameter. In eukaryotes, steroid cholesterol is a key regulator of membrane fluidity. It is essential, the cholesterol is essential to provide the desired fluidity to eukaryotic membranes. If enough cholesterol is available, the cholesterol precursor HMG-CoA gets converted to alternative products. Cholesterol molecules become part of the bilayers. At high concentrations of cholesterol, the bilayers do not stack very well, so much so that there is no phase transition between ordered state and disordered state. At the same time, presence of bulky steroid nucleus sterically hinders the motion of otherwise flexible acyl chains of the fatty acids and phospholipids. Thus, cholesterol modulates the membrane flexibility by both stopping molecular level motions as well as disrupting the ordered nature of the bilayers. The membranes of the prokaryotic cells also do not contain sphingomyelin and glycolipids. The lipopolysaccharides are of course present. In general, membranes contain lipids, proteins and carbohydrates. The functions as a containment and permeability control are carried by lipids. Proteins discharge specific functions we will discuss. As can be seen from the table shown in this slide, the ratio of the protein to the lipid is different for the membranes of the different intracellular organelles. Golgi membrane has least amount of protein to lipid ratio. Endoplasmic reticulum has slightly higher. The two leaflets of the bilayer have unequal distribution of some lipids. As early as in 1972, Bradshaw found that phosphatidylcholine and sphingomyelin were in the outer leaflet of the bilayer. On the other hand, much of the phosphatidylethanolamine and phosphatidylserine were present in the inner leaflet. It is worth noting that the overall amount of the lipid in both layers was similar, only its nature differed. Both phosphatidylethanolamine and phosphatidylserine contain primary amino group. TNBS is a well-known reagent for quantifying free amino groups in proteins. Hence, accessibility of these two phospholipids to TNBS has provided useful information about asymmetric partitioning of lipids between these two layers. NMR, EPR and X-ray diffraction analysis have confirmed the conclusions arrived from chemical and enzymatic studies. One reason for this is that integral proteins associated with membranes are generally glycosylated and face outer surface. Reversal of this orientation will bring oligosaccharides in the membrane interior. Equally important, many integral proteins are associated with the specific lipids. Thus, orientation of these lipids is dictated by orientation of the integral proteins. Asymmetric membrane structures are formed right at the biogenesis stage. Even a bacterial cell membrane contains more than 100 different proteins and many kinds of phospholipids. Each kind of phospholipid may have several different fatty acid composition. Hence, biogenesis of membranes is a complex exercise. All growing cells ultimately divide and hence also needs to worry about synthesis of membrane components. So, its synthesis becomes also the responsibility of the parent membrane. At all stages, the membrane has to retain its function, the control of permeability. This indicated that new lipids and proteins have to be synthesized and inserted into pre-existing membranes without disturbing its structural functional integrity. It so turned out that in both prokaryotes and eukaryotes, the biosynthetic enzymes for membrane lipid synthesis are integral proteins present right in the membranes. The membrane synthesis requires expansion, self-assembly, and ensuring the right orientations of the molecules. In most of the bacteria, lipids are only phospholipids. In such cases, both fatty acid acylation of glycerol 3 phosphate and subsequent steps takes place within the cell membrane. In eukaryotic cells, the expansion of existing membranes takes place with the help of endoplasmic reticulum. The key design element in membrane is self-assembly. Self-assembly is based upon fundamental nature of non-covalent forces. Thermodynamic considerations ensures that polar structures favor hydrophilic milieu and hydrophobic interactions leads to assembly of nonpolar structures. It is this self-assembly feature which allows vesicles to exist and get integrated with cell membranes. The property of amphiphilic lipids to be able to exist in multiple forms, vesicles, bilayers, fluid mosaics, liposomes, is exploited by eukaryotic cell membranes in outsourcing the synthesis of new membranes to endoplasmic reticulum. In animal cells, lipid biosynthetic enzymes have been found to be firmly part of the endoplasmic membrane. This supported the above pathway. In both cases, whether the site of synthesis is cell membrane, that is in bacteria, or endoplasmic reticulum, that is in eukaryotes, the enzyme synthesizing lipids are so placed that their active site faces cytoplasm. This is a facile design as precursors for lipid biosynthesis originates in cytoplasm. Their removal from cytoplasm and being picked up by these active sites embedded in membranes is what chemists employ in phase transfer catalysis. This strategy, however, raises another challenge. How do these phospholipids reach outer leaflets of the membrane? If you look at the bilayer carefully, it will be realized that it will also need flip-flop of the biophospholipid. Based upon certain experiments, Rotman and Kennedy were able to track synthesis of new phosphatidyl ethanolamine molecules. Their conclusions were that these new phospholipids occur initially in the inner leaflets only, but move over quite fast to the outer leaflet. It is estimated that this will require 10 raised to the power 5 times faster flip-flop rates than generally are thought to be permissible in biomembranes. This flip-flop is an energy-driven process, requires ATP and some enzymes to catalyze it. Provision for all this is available only for flip-flop of the newly synthesized lipids. This is ensured by requirements of enzymatic catalysis. Membrane proteins are synthesized in two different ways. Some are synthesized by polyribosomes in the cytoplasm. These are later inserted into membranes as what is called post-translational insertion. In other cases, polyribosomes are bound to the membranes. In such cases, proteins are inserted as these are synthesized. This is called co-translational insertion. it appears that the choice between the two modes depends upon the protein sequence. So in summary, in this module, we have learnt about how microscopy and centrifugation as tools helped in gaining early insights into the membrane components. Then we learnt about the various models of the biomembranes like lipid bilayer, fluid mosaic. We also learnt about the correlation between membrane composition and fluidity, and finally we learnt about membrane biosynthesis. The two membrane component, lipids and proteins, have turnover rates. Phospholipids have a shorter half-life. The half-lives of proteins vary in a wider range. These turnover rates allow the membrane to renew themselves and adjust to any change in their external environment. Such external parameters include temperature and availability of the nutrition, and its composition, of course. Thank you.